Right now, there is a very good chance that the expensive wireless headphones you're wearing are throwing away like up to 80% of the musical data your phone is actually sending them.
Oh, yeah, easily.
And you probably don't even realize it, right? Because your brain is actively doing all the heavy lifting in the background. It uses these crazy psychoacoustic tricks to just, fill in the missing gaps.
Which is pretty incredible biologically, but terrible from an audio fidelity standpoint. I mean,
Yeah.
we spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars on audio gear, and we entirely ignore the physical reality of how that sound travels from the source to our ears.
Yeah, exactly. We treat audio transport as just this like invisible
Oh,
utility,
yeah.
but behind that play button is this brutal engineering battle.
Right. It's a battle between bandwidth, stability, and, physical freedom.
Right.
The physics of moving high-fidelity audio data in real time dictate that you are always compromising something.
Whoa.
Whether you are tethered to a desk or walking around a crowded city.
And that is exactly the mission for today's deep dive. We are tearing into a stack of engineering notes and technical comparisons to decode the actual mechanisms behind wired, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi audio.
Yeah, we're really getting into the weeds today on packet delivery, RF crowding, codec math, all of it.
The goal is to translate these dense physics into a practical understanding, so you can build the absolute best audio setup for the environments you actually live in.
Because looking at the engineering trade-offs of these different mediums, it really reveals why consumer tech's push toward, total wireless convenience is fundamentally at odds with acoustic perfection.
It's totally at odds.
Right. When you strip away the marketing jargon, the hardware limitations just become incredibly obvious.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the uncompromising baseline. Because before we rip apart the wireless protocols, we really need to establish what a zero-compromise signal path actually looks like.
Right, what perfect audio is supposed to be.
Exactly. And looking at the specs here, the physical wire is still the undisputed gold standard.
Yeah.
And that's really for one primary reason, right? Zero radio frequency interference.
Yeah, zero. Because a dedicated physical medium, whether that's, copper or fiber optic, it's a closed point-to-point environment.
Yeah.
Your audio signal is entirely isolated inside that cable.
It's like having a dedicated high-speed plumbing pipe directly from a water reservoir straight to your faucet. There's no leaks. There's no sharing the pipe with anybody else.
That's a great way to put it. It isn't competing for airspace with a neighbor's router or a smart thermostat. Because of that physical isolation, a standard analog connection or even a digital one like USB or HDMI guarantees bit-perfect transmission.
With massive bandwidth, right?
Oh, yeah. The bandwidth ceilings wildly exceed the requirements for even 32-bit, 384 kilohertz files. It's not even a contest.
Which honestly explains why you see major esports tournaments outright ban wireless peripherals on the main stage.
Oh, absolutely. They have to.
Yeah, because they can't risk a localized RF spike in a stadium of, 20,000 cell phones causing a 10 millisecond drop in a headset. A physical tether provides a hard mathematical guarantee on latency.
And in professional environments, latency, which is, the round-trip time for a signal to be generated, processed, and converted back to analog,
Yep.
It has to be practically non-existent.
Right. You can't have lag when you're recording.
Exactly. In a wired setup, the end-to-end delay is dictated almost entirely by the processing speed of the digital-to-analog converter, the DA.
So how fast are we talking?
We are talking under 10 milliseconds, which is well below the threshold of human perception. I mean, if you're tracking vocals in a studio and monitoring yourself, even a 15 millisecond delay creates this comb filtering effect in your own head.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it basically makes it impossible to sing in time. You hear a weird echo of your own voice in your skull.
That sounds miserable. Now, the sources also dig into asynchronous USB as this major evolution for wired digital audio. It fundamentally solves the jitter problem by flipping the hierarchy of the hardware clocks, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
So in a traditional synchronous digital connection, the computer pushes audio data out using its own internal clock.
Right, but computers are noisy.
Incredibly noisy. A PC motherboard is a chaotic electrical environment, and its clock is highly susceptible to microscopic timing errors, which we call jitter.
And jitter isn't about dropping the data entirely, right?
No. The ones and zeros are all there. Jitter's about the right ones, and zeros arriving at the date at the wrong microsecond.
Okay, got it.
And that tiny timing error manifests as smearing or this harsh, brittle sound in the high frequencies.
So asynchronous USB just lets the external DAC take over as the master conductor, basically.
Precisely. The Daigi's dedicated, highly precise clock pulls the data from the computer exactly when it needs it. It totally ignores the PC's dirty timing signal.
It just takes control of the plumbing.
Yeah, it buffers the incoming data locally and then clocks it out internally with parts per million accuracy. It's beautiful engineering.
But, I mean, as bulletproof as wired digital connections are, analog wires still face sheer physics constraints. Specifically, the dreaded ground loop.
Yes, the ground loop.
It's the worst. It's that classic low-frequency hum or buzzing sound that absolutely ruins a perfectly good pair of studio monitors. The notes explain this happens when two physically connected devices are plugged into, like, different power outlets that have slightly different ground potentials.
Right, and the voltage differential actively tries to equalize by traveling across the audio cable's metallic shield.
Just hitching a ride on the audio wire.
Exactly. It's literally injecting an alternating electrical current directly into your acoustic path. And really, the only way to stop it is galvanic isolation.
Meaning you have to break the electrical connection entirely.
Right, and this is why optical cables, like Tuslink, were developed in the first place.
Oh, right, because they use light.
By converting the electrical signal to pulses of light, you maintain that high bandwidth wired connection, but you physically separate the electrical grounds. The hum is just instantly gone.
That's so smart, but, I mean, the undeniable flaw of any wire, whether it's optical or copper, is that you are physically tethered to a box.
Yeah, you are chained to your desk.
And the second you need to walk away to make coffee, the wire becomes a total liability. We demand mobility, which forces us to abandon that closed system for the open airwaves of Bluetooth.
Right, and Bluetooth is a brilliant point-to-point compromise. It essentially swaps the copper wire for a 2.4 gigahertz radio frequency link directly between the source and the sink.
Like your phone and your earbuds.
Exactly, and there's no local network required. It's just device to device.
But the 2.4 gigahertz ISM band is notoriously chaotic. I mean, microwaves, baby monitors, literally every Wi-Fi router in your apartment building operates in that exact same frequency space.
It's a wildly crowded highway. And plus, 2.4 gigahertz is actually the resonant frequency of water.
Wait, really?
Yeah, meaning it gets heavily absorbed by anything damp.
Including the human body.
Exactly. Your torso is essentially a massive walking bag of water. So if your phone is in your back pocket and your earbuds are in your ears, your body is physically blocking the RF line of sight.
Oh man, I never thought about that.
So the Bluetooth radio has to crank up its transmission power, or it has to literally bounce the signal off nearby walls just to maintain the link around your body.
Which directly impacts bandwidth, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
We just established that an audio cable has virtually infinite bandwidth, but a Bluetooth pipeline is incredibly narrow.
Very narrow.
You literally cannot fit an uncompressed CD-quality audio file through a standard Bluetooth connection. It has to be compressed using a codec.
And what's fascinating here is the mechanics of that compression. Modern codecs don't just, zip the file like a Word document. They use psychoacoustics.
Psychoacoustics.
Yeah, they exploit the biological limitations of human hearing.
Most people think that Bluetooth sounds totally fine. Is the quality drop really that noticeable?
Well, that's the genius of it. The drop isn't always noticeable because of phenomena like simultaneous masking.
Okay, I think I read about this. That's when a loud sound hides a quiet sound, right?
Exactly. If a loud snare drum hits at the exact same millisecond as a really quiet hi-hat decay, the human ear physically cannot perceive the hi-hat.
Your brain just drops it.
Right. So the codecs algorithm aggressively analyzes the incoming audio, identifies the data representing that inaudible hi-hat, and simply throws it in the trash.
It just deletes it.
It never even transmits it. And for most people in a casual listening environment, on a train or at the gym, this data deletion is functionally transparent. You don't hear what you couldn't hear anyway.
But the catch is ecosystem fragmentation. Because your phone and your headphones have to support the exact same codec to actually utilize those efficient, high-quality algorithms like LDX or aptX.
Right. The sender and the receiver have to speak the same language.
So if you pair an iPhone, which prefers AAC, to a headset that only supports aptX, they panic, right?
Yeah.
And they fall back to the mandatory lowest common denominator.
Yes. The subband codec, or SBC, which is, it's rough.
Because it's older.
Yeah, it ensures basic interoperability, so you get sound, but it uses a much older, way less efficient masking algorithm. It takes a really heavy hand to the high frequencies just to ensure the audio fits down that narrow pipeline.
And regardless of the codec, you're inherently adding massive latency.
Oh, huge latency. The processing chain is long.
Let's track that latency path because it really stacks up. The phone's CPU has to encode the audio, packetize it, modulate it into radio waves, transmit it.
And then the headset's chip has to receive it.
Right. Receive, demodulate, depacketize, decode, and finally run it through the DEC. The sources show standard Bluetooth latency easily clearing 220 milliseconds.
Which is over a fifth of a second.
That's huge.
It is. If you are watching a movie with standard Bluetooth, the actor's lips will move before you hear the dialogue. It breaks immersion instantly. So annoying.
Now, profiles like aptX low latency can compress that whole processing chain down to maybe 40 milliseconds, which is much better.
But you're still subject to RF crowding. Like, if the 2.4 gigahertz band gets congested, won't the devices just aggressively throttle the bitrate midstream?
Yeah, they will. They'll degrade the audio quality drastically to prioritize keeping the connection alive. They'd rather sound bad than disconnect.
That makes Bluetooth the undisputed champion for, the commute or the gym, where physical freedom is literally the only metric that matters. But it completely disqualifies it for anyone wanting high fidelity across a large space.
Right.
Because if you want the lossless quality of a wire, but you still want the mobility, and say you want to synchronize playback across a four-bedroom house, Bluetooth completely collapses.
It's not built for that at all. And that introduces the heavyweight network protocols.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi audio.
So things like AirPlay, Chromecast, and Sonos.
Exactly. You are moving from a narrow direct radio link between two devices to utilizing your home's entire IP network routing infrastructure. And the bandwidth jump here is just exponential. It's like if Bluetooth is a single courier on a moped, Wi-Fi is a massive freight highway.
I like that. That's exactly it.
We go from measuring throughput in hundreds of kilobits per second on Bluetooth to hundreds of megabits or even gigabits on a modern Wi-Fi network.
Right, which means you can throw uncompressed FLAC files or 24-bit high-resolution masters completely across the room without discarding a single byte of data. No psychoacoustics needed.
So no data in the trash.
Exactly. Because Wi-Fi utilizes TCP or advanced UDP packet delivery on this massive pipeline, there is zero need for psychoacoustic data deletion.
Look, the architecture of the transport changes completely right. When you cast a Spotify playlist to a Wi-Fi speaker, your phone is no longer the actual audio source.
That's the coolest part. Your phone just acts as a remote control.
It basically hands the internet URL over to the speaker.
Yep. And then the speaker reaches out to the router to fetch the stream directly from the server itself.
So your phone can die, or you can take a phone call, and the music never stops.
It never skips a beat. It also fundamentally solves the multi-room synchronization problem. In a Wi-Fi setup, the router acts as the master clock for the whole house.
Oh, like how the DAC was the master clock in the wired setup.
It's a similar concept, yeah. It uses protocols that are akin to precision time protocol to send localized timestamps to every single speaker on the network.
So it calculates the specific transmission delay to the speaker in the kitchen versus the speaker in the living room.
Exactly, and it tells them both to hold the audio data and execute playback at the exact same microsecond.
That is incredible. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Wi-Fi sounds like this ultimate compromise-free utopia, right? High quality and wireless.
Yeah.
But relying on a local router introduces a completely new set of enemies.
Traffic jams.
Exactly.
That heavy reliance on the local network router introduces the single biggest enemy of high-fidelity wireless audio network jitter.
Which we mentioned earlier with the PC motherboards, but this is on a network level.
Right. Think of network jitter like a conveyor belt, where boxes of audio data are arriving at completely random intervals.
Because the router is simultaneously handling, like, a Netflix 4K stream in the other room, a firmware update on a laptop, and your music.
Right. It doesn't prioritize the audio packets perfectly, so the speaker has to grab these sporadically arriving boxes and stack them in perfect sequential order before the conveyor belt runs out.
And if it runs out.
If the jitter exceeds a certain threshold, which is often just 30 milliseconds, or if packet loss hits 1%, the speaker runs out of data to play, and that results in an audible stutter or a dropout.
And to survive this inherently chaotic IP environment, Wi-Fi audio has to rely heavily on deep software buffers.
Massive buffers.
A buffer is really just an artificial delay, right?
That's all it is. The speaker hoards seconds of incoming audio data before it even starts playing. It creates a safety net so that if the router hiccups, the speaker has enough stored data to keep the music going while it waits for the next packet.
which is why Wi-Fi audio latency is utterly catastrophic for real-time applications.
It's the worst option for real time.
We're talking hundreds of milliseconds, sometimes up to 2 full seconds of delay.
Yeah, you could never use an AirPlay speaker as a studio monitor for tracking a guitar. The delay would make it impossible to play.
And it perfectly explains why home theater setups that use Wi-Fi speakers require heavy AV sync calibration.
Oh, absolutely.
The television knows the audio buffer on the network speaker is, say, a half-second deep. So it artificially delays the video playback on the screen by a half-second, so the explosions match the visuals.
Right, it isn't actually low latency, it's just synchronized delay.
Which is fine for a movie, but useless for a video game.
Exactly. And the sources also highlight these hidden protocol traps within these Wi-Fi ecosystems, which I find fascinating.
What do you mean by traps?
Well, you can have a gigabit router, right?
Yep.
And an uncompressed source file. But the software protocol itself will sometimes sabotage the fidelity for the sake of stability. Apple's AirPlay 2 is a prime example of this.
Oh, right. I saw this in the documentation. It points out that when you group multiple speakers using AirPlay 2, the system often forcibly downsamples the entire audio stream to 44.1 kilohertz, 16-bit.
Regardless of how high-res the original source is.
Why does it do that?
It does it to reduce the bandwidth payload. By shrinking the file size on the fly, it basically ensures that the weakest device on the network has enough buffer overhead to maintain synchronization.
Wow. So you might be paying for a premium high-resolution streaming tier, and you're broadcasting over a pristine network to a highly capable speaker.
And the protocol is just quietly bottlenecking the output behind the scenes to prevent a potential dropout.
That's wild. But honestly, this perfectly frames how we should be building our audio setups based on our daily environments.
Right, it's about the right tool for the job.
Exactly. Instead of forcing one protocol to do everything, you let the physics dictate the gear. Let's map this out seamlessly for everyone.
Sure, let's do a rapid-fire breakdown. If you were sitting down at your desk to do any critical monitoring, fast-paced gaming, or music production, you hardwire.
Period.
Period. You use asynchronous USB for your day or an analog wire for your headset. You eliminate RF crowding, you lock in sub-10 millisecond latency, and you guarantee bit-perfect transmission.
But the second you step away from that desk to walk to the train or head to the gym, you hand off to Bluetooth.
You have to.
You accept the latency and the psychoacoustic compression because you need the mobility and the direct peer-to-peer connection that doesn't rely on a router.
And you mitigate the damage by ensuring both your phone and your earbuds support an efficient codec like LDS or aptX.
Right. And then when you finally walk back into your house and you want to flood the entire living space with an uncompressed playlist, or you want to sit down for a movie,
that's when you transition to the Wi-Fi network. You embrace the massive buffers and the latency because you want lossless fidelity and microsecond synchronization across multiple rooms.
every single medium demands a sacrifice.
Oh.
You are always trading bandwidth for mobility
Yeah.
or latency for stability. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us, cutting through the marketing noise to understand the physical realities of codecs, packet delivery, and the invisible waves that actually power your playlists.
We've spent this entire time talking about the required compromises of wireless audio and network buffers. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, there's something really exciting on the horizon.
Oh, what's that?
The notes briefly mention a protocol called Dante.
Okay.
It's a pro audio over IP protocol. It's currently used in massive live stadiums to move uncompressed, multi-channel audio over standard IP networks with virtually zero latency.
Wait, how do they avoid the buffer issues we just talked about?
They achieve it using incredibly strict quality of service rules. It literally forces the network to part the seas for audio packets, treating them as absolute VIP traffic.
So no Netflix stream can get in the way.
Exactly. It completely bypasses the jitter problem. And if you really want to see where consumer multi-room and gaming audio is heading in the next 5 years, as our home routers get faster and smarter, go look at what commercial audio over IP is doing right now.
Wow. Could there be a day in the near future where the concept of an audio cable is totally obsolete, even for the most stubborn audiophiles and pro gamers?
I mean, if Dante trickles down to consumer tech, absolutely.
That is definitely something to keep on your radar. Well, until next time, keep questioning the technology you use every day and enjoy the music.